Welcome to another episode of the Gauntlet Podcast. My name is Jason.
My name is Steve.
My name is Dan.
All right, well, we are not going to waste your time at the top of our show. We're going to get straight to the meat of it. And why don't we get started with what we've been playing? Steve, what have you been playing lately?
Very little. I was deathly ill for a week and a half or so.
We're glad you're still with us.
Me too. But I played a few weeks ago Arctic Scavengers, which is a lot of fun. It's about as quickly as I've been sold on a game ever the first time I played it. Arctic Scavengers is a deck building game like Dominion, if you're familiar with that. And it keeps the things I like about Dominion, which is, basically just the deck building mechanic. But it actually has a theme that isn't very loosely tacked on with a thumbtack to a corkboard. And it incorporates bluffing and a bit more player interaction. You sort of take turns heading around. I will start off a round, then you will. Sure. And then at the end of that, we've all held back cards and you compare those cards for a fight.
Right.
And, whoever you're going for the same pile of contested resources. So they're hidden, but they're all good. There's no serious losers in the bunch. And so there's a bit of bluffing, like maybe I'm holding back 3 incredibly crappy cards because I have nothing and I'm just trying to make you guys waste cards. There's a bit of bluffing, bit of reading your opponents, and then a lot more interaction built in. Because Dominion can be, what's the phrase? Bit of multiplayer solitaire.
Right. Yeah.
But
classic accusation for German games, right? Like,
right.
It's just multiplayer solitaire, right? Yeah.
Is it bad if I say that, I like that?
Oh, I actually do too.
Okay.
I think it depends on the game. I mean, yeah, for sure.
Well, I think I like Dominion because it's less, interactive in a lot of ways.
I think that's one of the reasons why I don't like it. Yeah.
I still like Dominion a lot, so I'm not really criticizing it. That's just, a thing.
I don't dislike Dominion, but I have played Arctic Scavengers. It was one of the very last games I played with Rob before he tragically passed away. And why are you laughing at Rob's death?
Oh, I just find, the manner of his passing.
Yes, it was pretty funny. It was
a really funny way to get it.
It was funny, yeah. So anyway, before he died, that was one of the last games we played together, and I really liked it. I thought it was good.
Yeah.
And I liked some of those things you talked about. The theme did come through really well for me. So many problems, one of the major problems with all, Euro, games, and particularly in deck building games, is, man, they paste that theme on sometimes, right?
Right.
It could be, and so I dug, Arctic Scavengers, and I did like the interactivity between the players. I thought that was pretty cool. I think that's one of the things about Dominion that kind of rubs me wrong a little bit.
If I'm setting up a Dominion play area, whatever you call it, setting up the start cards, I try and aim for 2 or 3 interactive cards at least, just to sort of get things moving, play PvP a little bit.
Yeah, no, for sure. Did you get a chance to play with any of the expansions? Because it has a lot of expansions.
The only one I haven't played with yet at all is the buildings expansion.
Okay.
But I've played with the leaders. I didn't get to last time, but I've played with the leaders before. And as in Dominion, you start off with a certain amount of crappy, useless cards that you're going to try to get rid of. And the leaders expansion I like because it turns the scavenger cards, it's not scavenger, the refugee cards into something useful, by which I mean you can, depending on which leader you have, you can eat them or turn them into, turn them into suicide bombers or, turn them into soldiers or whatever.
Right.
You can do interesting things with them.
Well, I clearly didn't know what the theme for this game was. I thought Arctic Explorers or something.
No, it's
it's Apocalypse World in the
It's apocalyptic.
Snow. Okay.
Yeah, it's apocalyptic, yeah. Cool. What else have you been playing?
Really very little aside from Hell for Leather, which we all played and we'll get to, I think.
Cool. Awesome. Dan, what have you been playing lately?
So I also played Hell for Leather, but the other game I played this week was The Deep Forest.
Okay.
Which is a reskin of The Quiet Year. So it is, and I think Avery McDonough was actually involved in the reskin itself.
I believe so, yeah.
Along with
Mark Diaz-Truman.
Mark Diaz-Truman, yeah. I guess just to real briefly give an overview of what The Quiet Year is. It's a game about a community. You play it with a deck of cards and you draw the cards and events happen because of the cards. You check an oracle to see I drew the ace of spades. And so that means that this thing happens. And, but the interesting thing about it is that you're playing the community itself. So you don't have individual characters, but you're playing strains of thought within the community.
Right. Yeah.
And so, toward the end of The Quiet Year, I guess it's important to say, it's called The Quiet Year because you're not allowed to talk.
You cannot talk.
There are very specific rules about when you can talk. And,
Oh, I did not know this.
Yeah. It's cool though.
It's really
when
cool,
everyone's obeying it, it's cool.
Right.
Yeah.
But so it kind of ends up like you'll sort of figure out what your ideology is and you sort of start representing that. And then people will kind of naturally like pick up counter ideologies to you. And so it becomes kind of confrontational for a game that has no talking.
Yeah. Well, because it expresses, you get to express your displeasure in a very visual way, essentially, right? You
Kind of staring daggers at
No, you collect like the actual physical tokens that are like, they're basically like, they have no mechanical function. They're just your way of saying, I'm pissed.
Right.
That's it.
great.
Yeah. They're called contempt tokens.
Right.
Oh, I love this.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
It's a great game.
And so the reskin is you are a bunch of monsters and you've just driven off the humans from your land and they're going to come back in a year, but you have like a year where you can like decolonize and remove all of the traces of the humans and all of that and like kind of rediscover your monsterdom.
Okay.
And so
I like that. Yeah.
One of the things that I found was different about this is that you're not actually playing a specific monster. So like as the game goes on, you introduce monsters and other monsters die and all of that. And so like you kind of head hop around. And so when anything happens, you sort of pick a monster and say like, well, I think this monster responds in this way.
Right.
And so you don't actually, it becomes kind of more cooperative.
Oh, okay.
The tension isn't there because it's not like you embodying an ideology like it is in Quiet Year. It's like, well, right now I'll play this guy because I think he's interesting. Like he would have something interesting to say about what's happening. But like you hop around and there's not as like tight ownership as there is in Quiet Year.
I think we should probably mention the for people who don't know anything about the Quiet Year, we should mention the mapping feature of that game. And I gather the Deep Forest has a similar mapping feature.
Yes.
So I'm curious about the differences, Dan, because I didn't get a chance to play. In the Quiet Year, you're basically drawing like all your building projects, like all the things you want your post-apocalyptic community to try to accomplish, right? Like, oh, we're going to make a water reservoir. We're going to, build feed storage bins or whatever, right?
But is it things to aim towards or you draw them as you complete them?
Well, so you draw the initial kind of like layout of your community, your campsite or whatever. And then there are things that allow you there's a process by which you can start projects, and the projects have like a countdown timer, like, okay, this project, we kind of agree this will take about 4 weeks. And so you kind of count it down using the pips on a D6. A D6 is a 6-sided die. Using the pips on a D6, you count down the projects, and then the ones that are successful are there. But the Oracle can cause like bad things to happen to your projects, right? So that's also one of the things you discuss, like is this project even worth pursuing? Like that kind of thing. So I'm curious about how the mapping feature works in the Deep Forest.
So it's pretty much the same thing. So, you also still do your projects and everything, like monsters can undertake projects, but there's a little more flexibility on it. Like you kind of decide like, well, these guys are the ones who are doing this project. So if something happens to them, you can kind of decide as a group, like, well, I think that probably derails that project and just take it off the board. But, you're drawing things, like you're drawing the projects as you do them, and you're drawing, in the beginning, you sort of draw like what the humans left behind. And so everybody draws something that the humans left behind, and, one of those things becomes something that your monster society adopted, and the rest become taboo.
Oh,
and
that's
so
cool.
you're dealing with
neat.
like, so you're kind of dealing with like the remnants of this like human incursion and, deciding like which parts of human society you embrace and which parts you reject.
That sounds pretty neat. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
That's
it's
pretty
a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Quiet Year. I'm anxious to try the Deep Forest. The one thing that's a little disappointing about the Deep Forest, it's not the Deep Forest's fault, but the Quiet Year has those beautiful cards that you can order. Like you don't need them. They're not necessary for play. You can just use a deck of playing cards on the Oracle, but on Avery's website, she sells like this, like custom deck of cards for the Oracle, and they're really great. And the Deep Forest doesn't have such a thing yet. So that.
I know. I was sad every time I had to like cross-reference the sheet.
Right. Yeah. Cause it takes longer for one thing. It's a little slower.
It's not bad.
Well, I found it to be a little slow. Cause we played both ways. We played the Quiet Year both with the cards and without the cards, and with the cards is so much better, but maybe not dramatically better, but
right. Yeah.
But better nonetheless. So anyway, that was not really a complaint at all. That was just me being entitled.
Right.
Just being an entitled asshole. Sorry. But Mark Diaz Truman, if you want to get on that and make cards for the Deep Forest, that'd be great.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. Well, so I guess that's my list then, huh?
Yep.
I also played Hell for Leather, which we'll talk about momentarily. I played Apocalypse World, so we did our first full session of Apocalypse World. You know, we've talked a lot about PBTA games, and it's actually been a while since I've played Apocalypse World, which is obviously the progenitor of these games. I'd run it before, but it's been a while. And in the interim, I've run lots and lots of different PBTA games. It's great. I'm loving it. I've got 5 players. Everything is, we're hitting all of our story beats. The tone is perfect. Like everyone's doing a great job just working with the fiction and putting their characters in situations that are interesting as opposed to safe, right? Like there's a lot of, everyone's doing a great job. The one thing that I am, we've talked about this before. I think some of the later hacks of Apocalypse World like kind of smoothed out some of Apocalypse World's rough edges a little bit, because the base, like Apocalypse World proper, has just a few little weird things about it that I think some of the later games kind of like clarified and made it a little easier to work with. So that's kind of an interesting, having played a bunch of them and now going back to Apocalypse World, it's kind of interesting to kind of see that again. But that said, I mean, we're having a great time. It's working really well. I'm anxious to see where the story goes. It's delivering in terms of like tension and like oppressive scarcity. Like all that stuff is coming out really great in the game. So I'm pretty happy with it. And then let's see. I've played Microscope. We played a game of Microscope on Thursday. I'm not going to go into what it was about because I'm just not. But Microscope is terrific. It's a terrific game. It's so good with 3 people. We happen to have 3 people, so it was like the perfect thing to put down for 3. I'm still not sold on the. So just so listeners understand, Microscope in Microscope you make a history, and so you start with this, in whatever setting you want to make your history in. It's basically a world creation thing, right? You start with your like beginning point of your history, your end point of history, and then you make more periods in between. And then within these periods, you have like these events that take place, and then you can have scenes within the events. Okay. So you have like this historical document you're making almost, right? It creates this nice like little artifact of index cards, like with your history on it, right? I'm not sold on the scenes still.
I was going to ask you how you felt about the scenes.
I'm still not sold on the scenes. They just don't quite come off right. Like they really don't. Because the way you have to frame them up, like it's so, it feels so forced and artificial, because like you have to just like, you're literally like airdropping into the middle of like a point in time, and not even just like a broad point in time, a really fucking specific point in time. Right. Yeah. Like a conversation between 2 people at a very critical moment in history. You're just boom there.
Yeah.
Right. It never quite comes off right.
And you have very little to guide you within the scene.
You really don't.
There's not much motor on your boat.
And you're supposed to like be doing the scene to like answer this question that the group has about that moment in time, right? Like, why did Lord Farfenel, invade the wizard's tower or whatever, right? Like, you're supposed to be answering some question. And the thing is, though, it's almost impossible. And you're supposed to just answer this question and find the answer sort of organically through the scenes. But like, it's hard. And the only way you can really kind of successfully do it is if you kind of have something in mind already, right? Like,
because otherwise you just kind of flail around.
Yeah. So it's a bit like, it's a bit off, that part of it. And also, we've played Kaleidoscope, which is a hack of it, right? Which is a hack in which you make like a crazy foreign film. And that doesn't have the scene thing. That only has like 2 layers of the time periods that you're doing, but except you're just looking at like a movie. So you don't do the little like role playing scenes, and it works great. Yeah. Like it's perfect. Like it's a really, really good game. So I'm convinced you can probably ditch that part of Microscope and it'd still be great.
Have you guys played Microscope with the dictated scenes?
Yeah, well, so that's what we end up just doing, right? Because we all hate the role-playing scenes so much, we just end up dictating them, right? Yeah. In which case you ask the question and then you just answer it. Right? So like, and that is like a lot more satisfying than like this strange, spontaneous improv role-playing thing that to get to some answer. I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah. Well, and because you're not role-playing at any other time, right? So it's like storytelling.
Yeah. It's real jarring.
At some like high level, and then all of a sudden it's like, here's a bunch of characters, you don't know who any of them are, they're all brand new, and go.
Yeah, it's super weird. I mean, I kind of like it, and it's one of those like, what do you call Warrior Poet? Your platonic ideal of a game, right? Yeah, it's got that quality for me. Like, I love the idea of it. Like, we should all be able just to like, randomly like think of some characters and role play to find truth, right? Like I love that, like I love that conceptually, but it doesn't quite work. So, but in general, I love Microscope. I've played it, probably, a dozen times. It's great. And then from Mandatory Fun Club, which is our Friday thing, we played Not Safe for Work, or we created not safe for work dungeon world monsters and magic items. I do not want to get put on a watch list, so
these are monsters who don't like wear hard hats and disobey OSHA regulations.
No, it's not
open-toed sandals.
No, it's not monsters that violate OSHA regulations. It's just dick monsters, basically.
Okay,
yeah,
right. So
it's
just stuck a bunch of dicks.
It's just
on dungeon
dick and
monsters.
vagina monsters.
Okay.
Yeah. We tried to be more clever than just being crude. Our favorite was the lube cube. Go look it up on G+, folks. It's great. So there's it was fun. It was just, again, like, I'm really enjoying Mandatory Fun Club because it's a chance to sort of experience all of you who I get to enjoy in a role-playing game context in some sort of other context, which is fun. So I like that, but it's still a structured thing, right? I'm never just going to go out to lunch or dinner with one of you. That's never going to happen. It's going to be an organized, calendared gauntlet event in which we hang out. So it was pretty cool. And then, so that just leaves Hell for Leather. Who wants to set up what Hell for Leather is all about? Steve?
Hell for Leather is basically The Running Man, the role-playing game. Oh, and we should specify this is Hell, FOR Leather, not Hell number 4
right,
Leather.
Which is vitally important.
Right.
It is indeed.
Because there's 2 games with the same name that came out of some design contest with, I think, that name. 2 games, 1 name or something. Yeah. Anyway, so Hell for Leather, the default setting is you're on some horrible dystopian reality TV show trying to run away from people who are incentivized to kill you.
Right.
Or I think it's sort of more The Running Man meets The Amazing Race. Cause you're not on like a set, but you're out in the world.
Yeah. It's a worldwide game show where everyone in the world is trying to kill you, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
The notable bit about the mechanics, I think, is that it uses a dice tower on a little target. So there's this
a stack of dice.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Not
the dice rolling thing.
Correct.
It took me a second. Yeah. I'm not a grognard. So
I didn't
Vassal. Intuitively know what that was. Yeah.
And so whenever you're about to do roll to overcome a conflict, you stack a die on top of the minimum 3 dice stack.
Right.
And then you try, and these are D6s.
And tiny D6s too.
Tiny D6s.
12 millimeter specified.
Exactly.
Just to remind folks, a D6 is a 6-sided die.
Right.
Yes. Thank you, Jason.
Jason, don't take a drink yet. Hold on. And then you roll D10s into that target. What are those?
A D10 is a 10-sided die.
Thank you, Jason. You can take a drink now.
That's the introductory paragraph to my new role-playing game, by the way, where I explain what all the Ds are.
What is a role-playing game?
Right. So you're trying to roll a much larger 10-sided die into this, what?
A target circle.
6-inch diameter little target.
That sounds fair.
Without knocking over that stack of dice.
Right.
Knock it over, terrible things happen. Get it within, then you succeed. And if it's on the edge or out of the circle, you fail.
Right.
And then how did our setting creation go?
I loved it. I thought the setting creation was great. I know Dan doesn't like it. So listeners, Dan doesn't like it when we talk about like the actual stories of our role-playing games, like the actual stories that take place.
Right.
But the setting is fine.
So the setting.
We can talk about the setting. I'll allow it.
So it was really cool. So the process was cool too. I really enjoyed this, like the setting. If you create your own setting, like the sort of like step by step.
But we didn't do that.
We didn't do it. You're right. Yeah, we didn't do it. I guess it actually, okay. So I take that back.
There's a weird bidding mechanic where you can like bid to create setting elements, but we figured we were all grown ups and we know how to share. So
you enjoyed the way in which we ignored the game's mechanics.
I should say like all the different little like things you have to hit. Like you have to have an adversary, then you have to have 3 checkpoints, and then you have to do the characters a certain way. Like I just like that formalized like setup process. It produces a consistent result. We did little fat kids kidnapped on their way to fat camp.
Right.
And taken to Candyland.
Where basically everything wants to eat them.
Right.
It was great.
And so we had the Candyland part first, and then we're talking about, which character, or we're all sort of sitting there making characters and talking about, well, we should sort of be broad archetypes. And 3 out of 4 of us are making the fat kid.
Right. I know. Yeah. It was great though. I mean, so we did like kind of a twisted, dark version of like Candyland, right? That was a lot of fun.
Right.
Just so listeners know, like the whole like thrust of Hell for Leather, as best I gathered, and I didn't read the rules to it beforehand. Dan prepped for it, but it's all about like this kind of a push your luck thing about like how violent you want your characters to be. Like, am I going to solve this using violence? You know, and then so violence is like a theme of the game, like intense, gory violence, right? And I liked how we were able to translate that into like candy violence. Right. That was fun.
But it was a really like beautiful dichotomy between like the kids were ripping apart the candy. And it was like, you know, candy guts and stuff. And then the candy would attack the kids, which was actually like blood and gore. Right. And like these kids getting mauled by like delightful candy creatures.
Right.
So,
exactly. Yeah. Mechanically, what'd you guys think? I mean,
I was a little unsure going into it. It seems like there's a lot of moving parts when you read the rules, but it actually is a lot simpler in play than it is when you're reading it. I think one of the things that's really cool about it is that as you play, you get more injured. And so initially you're kind of throwing the dice with your dominant hand. And then if your character gets injured, then you're throwing it with your offhand. And then if your character gets injured more, you have to throw 2 dice at the same time with your offhand. Yeah. But you can counteract that by, using violence to temporarily like boost your power and ignore your injuries. And so it kind of encourages you as the game goes on. It naturally gets more and more violent because no one wants to be the dude throwing 2 dice at the giant tower with their left hand.
Right.
So, yeah.
I thought the die tower thing is, well, we're going to talk about this probably for the main topic, but it accomplished what I think Dread tries to accomplish, but like about 10 times better.
Oh, right? I don't agree with that at all.
You don't? Oh, I do. What do you think, Dan? I'm curious.
Oh, I agree too. Yeah, I think that it definitely is. Yeah, it played like what I thought Dread was supposed to do.
I agree. Yeah. I feel like, I agree. So we'll talk about that.
So you feel like there's almost never supposed to be a success in Dread?
Well, okay. So, I mean, we should probably give the listeners some context. This little task you do in Hell for Leather, the flicking the dice at the dice tower, it's hard. Like it's pretty tough, right? I think what Dan and I are getting at is, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, in the main topic, but what Dan and I are getting at is Dreads doesn't feel challenging most of the time, right? Like, right, to me, exactly. Like, Dreads only gets challenging.
That's true, but if you don't pay any attention, you're screwed. Well,
no.
We saw that when,
We'll get to it. Anything else you want to say about Hell for Leather? I mean, I loved it. I thought it was great. I think I'm somewhere in between you guys on the mechanics. Like, I don't think I'm as sold as Dan was, but, I'm probably more along where you're at on it, Steve, in terms of like the mechanics. But at the same time, you know, it delivered, so it's kind of hard to fault it too much, you know.
It has an end game. After you reach the 3rd checkpoint, you go to the end game, where you either try and fight the adversary or whatever they call it.
Right.
Or you fight each other. And this one,
right, yeah.
There wasn't, it just seemed,
it wouldn't make any sense in our context.
Fictionally inappropriate to fight each other. So we went with fighting the adversary, which, turns out is completely impossible.
It's impossible. It's so hard. Yeah.
You'd have to be really good.
To
get through it.
Yeah. All of you, by the way, would have to be really good.
That's true. Yeah.
No weakest links.
Yeah. I don't think we really need to go into details. Just totally impossible.
Yeah.
It is very hard. I think that's supposed to be like, are they trying to be genre appropriate there? I'm not sure. Like, is it supposed to be hopeless?
Oh, I think so. At least to some extent. Like, I think it's supposed to be really rare to get through it.
Yeah.
Are we all supposed to be the people that aren't Arnold Schwarzenegger, I guess?
I guess so. I don't know. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Not sure. Well, Hell for Leather, anything else?
Nope.
Awesome. Let's move on to Giving Me Life. So our next segment, as always, is Giving Me Life. This is where we get a chance to talk about some things that are not necessarily related to role-playing games. Steve, what's giving you life this week?
So as I mentioned earlier, I was super, super ridiculously sick for a while, and that meant I was pretty much confined to my room, which luckily has a computer. And so after I ran out of Walking Dead episodes to be mad at, I went through the whole run of Will Wheaton's Tabletop, and not always great.
I agree.
Not every guest deserves to be heard. But
I agree.
Yeah. But there's some gold in them Nar Hills, and I enjoyed basically just watching people play board games while I
agree
couldn't.
with that too.
Yeah. That's about it. I'm sure I'm not going to explain anything people don't already know.
You're not blowing anyone's mind right now, I imagine. Yeah.
Well, it's nice that we can give a small show like Tabletop a plug.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Broadcasting to our gigantic audience. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Hopefully that Will Wheaton character will be a star one day.
I hope that guy keeps plugging at it.
I think he hopes so as well.
Ouch.
If I revealed the email address at the end of the episode, we'd get so much hate mail right now. That's okay. Hey, Dan, what's giving you life?
So what's giving me life this week is I've fully boarded the hype train for virtual reality because there was the new announcement of Steam and HTC banding together and creating their new virtual reality headset. And
Valve and HTC.
what did I said Steam, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, whatever. It's essentially the same thing, right? But Valve and HTC. And, the exciting thing though is that for the first time ever, there's actually kind of a release window for a consumer version of VR. And that release window is shockingly soon. It is Christmas this year.
Okay.
I'm excited.
Here's
I
my
can't wait.
concern. If I die in the game, do I die in real life?
Well, I mean, I guess that remains to be seen, but sometime after Christmas, we could answer that.
After Christmas, they've got our money and they can kill all of us off.
They need to leave some people around to buy like version 2 of the Vive or whatever it's called.
I think it's the
Vive.
Vive.
Is it the Vive?
I think it's the Vive.
I don't think it is.
I think it's the Vive.
Because they've had revive in a lot of their press stuff, and I don't think
That's
they're trying to say
Revive.
That's
Revive.
Revive. It might be Vive. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a weird name. Vive. Is that the prototype name or is that the actual product
I think
name?
it's actually the actual name.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I don't think they would be getting out there and like putting out a prototype name since they're already talking about consumer versions.
Yeah,
of
I'm
these
pretty
products.
excited about this because here's the thing. Oculus Rift, I know you don't think this, Dan, but I'm not convinced that thing's going to go anywhere. I don't know. Like, I feel a little bit better about it after we talked about this earlier today, like the state of Oculus Rift, which was like the sort of the product that, or the team that kicked off this whole VR, this latest VR craze or whatever, right? All their dev kits and stuff. And so I guess maybe they'll ship at some point, but boy, they better hurry, right? Cause once like Valve and HTC gets ahead of them, like they may not, you know, I mean.
But so this week, actually, I guess by the time this podcast drops, we'll know what happened at GDC because the game developer conference is this week. And so Oculus has a big presence there. And now everybody's like, oh, well, they better announce something cool or they're like dead in the water. But I don't know. We'll see.
If they don't have a thing that's like Joel from The Last of Us, like in VR, like where I get
your only hope is Sony on that. You're gonna have to like
true,
bathe
yeah.
Joel in
I know,
Morpheus.
I know,
Yeah. So
no, yeah. I mean, I have to say, I feel a lot more like hope after this HTC Valve thing, mostly because the thing they're showing looks awfully done, right? Like it looks, or not, it doesn't look done, but it looks like they've got their logos on it and stuff, right? Like it looks like a product that they've been spending some time on. I mean, it just looks a little more polished.
That's what makes it work.
It looks a little more polished than the Oculus did on day one, right? I mean, it looks, you know.
Well, it looks pretty similar to the newer versions of the Rift.
That's
so,
fair. Yeah. I'm excited about it, but I still have this like little twinge of doubt. I don't know. Like there's just the skeptic in me that like thinks that this is not going to happen. Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just setting my bar low, you know.
I think so. No, this is happening, man. You better get ready.
All right. Well, all right, cool. So the thing giving me life this week, I am not currently satisfied with my weight. I think I'm a little overweight. I have been for a couple years. The problem is, I'm incredibly fucking lazy. I'm just so damn lazy. And, I don't like to work out and I don't even like to walk unnecessarily. Like I'm very lazy. And so
that'll do it.
I've been doing so much research on basically how can I lose weight by literally doing nothing, right? Like how can I lose weight? So
tapeworm?
That's a thought, right? I landed finally on intermittent fasting.
Okay.
So let me explain to you what intermittent fasting is. The idea, and I think there's several different ways you can do it, but the way I'm doing it, and I've been doing it for a couple days, the way I'm doing it is you wake up and you don't eat until like 1 p.m. You just don't have breakfast. You just skip all that and you don't eat until 1 p.m.
Okay.
You have a single meal at 1 p.m., whatever you want. Okay. Then you stop eating and then you eat at 8 p.m. You eat whatever you want at 8 p.m. And then you do whatever you do, go to sleep, you wake up and you don't eat again until 1 p.m. So you have like this 16-hour window where you're not eating, right? The idea is that because you don't have the insulin in your body, like your body can only burn fat, right? Because you're not taking in calories for like 16-hour period, right? So I don't know if it's working yet because like I said, I've only been doing it for a couple days. Side benefit though, it turns out I hate like bothering with like the preparation of food and like planning for what I'm going to eat. Like I really hate it. Like it's the worst, right? The last 2 mornings I felt so liberated by just not having to worry about breakfast. Like, fuck it. I'm not eating breakfast. I don't even have to think about it. I've got an extra 20 minutes in my morning to do whatever the fuck I want, you know? So I don't know. I kind of like that. It also plays into my whole laziness thing, right? Like it's so easy. It's easy to just like not make a choice And then
Right, yeah.
wait till 1 o'clock, you know, so it's
Well,
it's surprisingly simple.
What if all your meals came in a bag and you just added water to it and then you just drank all your meals?
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm kind of feeling this. Yeah, that's pretty
good.
good.
And then you could just like strap into your Oculus Rift, which may never exist.
Right.
We've established, but strap into your Oculus Rift, have like a tube feeding Soylent to
Indeed,
you,
yeah.
and just be in great shape.
You're selling me a vision here, Dan.
Yeah,
and,
this is our inevitable
I know.
cyberpunk future that we're like careening toward, and I can't wait. So
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, let's go on to our next segment. So for our main topic today, we wanted to talk about dreaming about a second edition. So what I mean by that is I think there are games out there that I personally have played and loved, continue to love, but they do some things in their mechanics that I think I'd like to see revised, right? I would love to see like changed because I do like the game so much. I want to see it be perfect, right? I want to see like what the game can really be, you know, after having, you know, some perspective or whatever. So we've each chosen a game, that we'd like to, approach from this, frame of reference. And, Dan, what is the game that you chose that you would like to see a second edition of?
mine, I actually kind of cheated on because I don't think this game ever really got a first edition.
Okay.
So this is kind of a deep cut. If you go into the depths of the Bully Pulpit archive on their website, in their free game section, there's a game toward the bottom that's called Danger Mountain. This was a game that was like a Game Chef entry or something that Jason Morningstar did like years and years ago, and then just kind of put up on his webpage, and I think never did anything else with after that, like you do with Game Chef entries. But we actually ended up playing it, and it is really good in a lot of ways. And so like it's one of the games that I've played that had the most kind of like potential that I could see being like turned into a fantastic game. I don't know that you could tell the same story in any other game that I've played.
So what's it about?
So that's what I was getting to, is I was building to that dramatically.
Gotcha.
The story that it tells is
This the part where you're going to say what it's about?
Just about, yes.
Okay.
So the story that
You'll
it tells
let me know when we get there.
Give it like another 5 minutes. I'm almost there. So, Game Chef entry on Jason Morningstar's webpage. Anyway, it's about a disaster striking a small town, and it's kind of like in the form of an 80s disaster movie, right?
Like late 70s.
Late 70s, early 80s, yeah. The way it works is there's a set of locals who are all like come with their own little cards, and you lay them all out in the middle of the table, and these are like the hicks who inhabit like the small town where this disaster is about to strike. And before the game starts, everyone at the table has secretly picked from a menu of any of the like 12 disasters that could hit this town. And so everyone has their own disaster in mind for what this poor town's going to suffer. And so you kind of go through, and you each like take turns picking the locals and playing a scene that like centers around that character in particular. And they all come seated with like really good leading questions about like there's always a villain who's moved into town, and it's always like his doing that's going to unleash the disaster somehow, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, he's doing something that's an affront to the environment, and so Mother Nature is going
drilling
to strike
too
back,
deep.
right?
Yes,
Exactly.
yeah.
But it's always like they do a really good job of making the villain interesting, because all of the characters have questions that tie into the villain. Like there's like the bureaucrat who's one of his questions is, why is the villain's plan going to be so good for the town's economy, and things like that. And so, and there's a lot of characters who are like tied in, like, why did you quit working for the villain? Or what did you come here to deliver to the villain? And so like, they all kind of tie into the villain, and then they all kind of tie into each other. So there's like, you know, which other local haunts your dreams at night, and things like that. So, you kind of play through these characters, and they each get one scene, and then they go into a pile. As you go around, like, you'll introduce more and more characters, and a doom pool is building, and at some point the disaster happens, and all of the characters who you've introduced become victims. And so you like unspool the stack of characters as you go back and rescue all of the characters who you had previously introduced. And so ideally it plays really nice, because it's got like this nice symmetrical sort of build to it where like you introduce the characters, and then you save the characters, and then the game's over.
And do you do those do you save them in reverse order?
No, you save them in like random order.
Okay.
But it all ties together very well. So why I think it needs a second edition, I think, or a first edition, is that it kind of makes no sense trying to play it. That's kind of a big problem. There's just like, it's obviously like a contest game, right? Like there's this page says you do something this way and then it's contradicted on the next page. Okay. So that's just standard sort of like just needs more polish, right? But there's also issues with it's really hard to ever know how long a game's going to take because you're building this doom pool and then eventually when you roll 4 even numbers on the doom pool, the disaster strikes. And then you're basically halfway through unless a secondary disaster strikes. In which case, you are nowhere near halfway through.
Wait, what? There could be another disaster?
Yeah. So the first disaster can be a red herring, which is kind of amazing. And so, like, the volcano explodes and everybody's like, oh god, the volcano exploded, we're all doomed. But no, it was actually giant ants that was your big problem. So then giant ants come running down the hill. So which is great.
Real quick, sorry. How do you decide whose disaster is the primary?
Before you do your scene, you roll a doom pool, and if you're the one who triggers the disaster, it was yours. And every scene before the disaster happens, you're foreshadowing which disaster you chose, which is fantastic too. So there's like at the end of every scene, there's like, oh, the mountain's rumbling, or the ants seem to be getting agitated. Do
you sort of end up with a game where there's a volcano that kills the giant ants, but then somebody's also every once in a while hinting at a glacier that never appears or something?
There's a lot of hints at obviously there's a lot of badness that could be descending on this town.
Really terrible town to live in right about now.
Yeah, it's real bad, but great vibe though.
Yeah.
So is that so it's just an issue of just clarifying the rules and the pace of the game?
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, make the rules read in a way that's actually playable because we were hand waving a lot of stuff.
Oh, I see.
As we went through it. And we were hitting the tone right, but I don't know that I feel like we were probably playing it completely differently than another group would have played it.
You were having fun in spite of the rules, not because
exactly.
of them. Right. Yeah. I've not played Danger Mountain, but I have the PDF and that's a good looking PDF, isn't it?
Oh, it really is.
Yeah, it's so good. Like it really, really just in terms of like just formatting and like color choice and, in terms of like nailing home this idea of a 1970s disaster film. Really good stuff.
Yeah. And all the character cards have like nice art and everything.
Yeah, that's great.
Like the production values on this game are fantastic. Like weirdly good.
Yeah,
for kind of an unpublished game.
Right, yeah.
So the disasters that people select as their one to advocate for, did you say those come off of a preset list?
Yeah, so there's a list of 12, and then there's supplemental material that adds like another 12 real weird ones, like Indian graveyard and aliens and stuff like that. So
is the fact that they're preset enforced by the rules, or can you just say,
oh, I'm sure you can do whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. But they just give you a buffet of like 12 to choose from, which is good. Like, they kind of do that with everything. There's a list of like a handful of villains who you can just pull one off the list and say like, well, we're going to play with this dude.
I just wanted to make sure I could be William Shatner, haunted by giant spiders. That's all I need.
Or Janet Leigh in Giant Rabbits.
Was that the one that also had, DeForest Kelly then too?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Night of the Lepus is so good.
Yes,
man, it's so great.
Slow-mo giant rabbits. Man.
Yeah, and so listeners,
that does sound good.
Night of the Lepus is this old movie from the 60s, whereby maybe 70s, whereby Janet Leigh and DeForest Kelly are being terrorized by giant rabbits in this trailer park in the desert, and I love it. The practical effects are terrific. They have a model of a trailer park. Okay. Where they just threw a rabbit in there. Like, it's real obvious. They just set a regular rabbit, like, down in this model and let it hop around. So, yeah.
That's good stuff.
It's pretty good. Yeah. Cool. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
I think that's it.
All right, cool. Well, the game I chose is also a Jason Morningstar game. It is, one of his more famous games, though, called the Shab-al-Hiri Roach. And if am I mispronouncing that? I've been saying it that way.
That's the way I've always said it.
Yeah.
The Shab-al-Hiri Roach. Just a quick, what it's about. In the Shab-al-Hiri Roach, you play professors at the prestigious, Pemberton University, circa 1940 or so, something like that, like in the 40s, late 30s, something like that. I think it's between the wars, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
I believe that's
sense.
right, yeah. You play professors. You each have, your petty professor things you're trying to accomplish, right? Like you want your particular research project funded or you just published a paper and you're trying to curry favor with the, for tenure and all that stuff, right? And so there's all this, all the petty bullshit politics of being in academia. My boyfriend's in academia, so I know how that goes. It kind of hits home in that regard. So there's that whole part of it. So here's the thing. There is on the campus this roach. Okay. this roach is a physical incarnation of an ancient Sumerian god. Okay. And this ancient Sumerian god, basically, like, during his, in his era, he was used to being worshipped like a god king, and he handled people decisively and brutally, right? And now he's come back into this world in this form of this greasy roach. It's specifically described as a greasy roach. And, what do they call people who study bugs?
Entomologists.
Yeah. One of those guys, who works for Pemberton University brings it back, right? But the roach is looking to like reestablish its kingdom. And so it has witnessed in these professors for the first time something it recognizes in their ambition and their desire for power, right? And prestige. So the roach, does this thing where occasionally it crawls into the mouth of one of the professors and wedges itself into their brain and takes over. And so the whole game plays out over the course of a semester at Pemberton University, and the professors are basically it's basically a PvP game whereby the professors are doing increasingly crazy things against each other to one up each other, especially if you have the roach, right? Like the whole idea is to bring down other people and build yourself up. But if you have the roach, you might like do it in a murderous or insane way, right? It's strictly PvP in the sense that like there's a winner at the end, and so you're collecting like victory points or whatever, and whoever has the most at the end and who is not currently possessed by the roach wins the game. Multiple people can be possessed by the roach. The book explains it away as like these are just like the children of the roach or whatever, like it's eggs. And so it creates a game. We've played it, I don't know, I think we played it a couple times officially, and I think I've played it even a couple more times, like kind of off the calendar. And it's always a blast. It's always fun. It's always like just crazy madness. It's a good time. Why I love it, the setting is terrific. Like just that the metaphor, I guess, is kind of like amazing, right? Really, really good setting. It has this mechanical feature whereby there are like these cards that you draw every round. And the cards have like behaviors that if you do them, you get like victory points, I believe, or no, you get extra dice, right? In your roll. I think if you do these like behaviors whereby you like tear down, it's a specific behavior, like go do this or go do that. Or it gives you like a little ability. And if you have the roach, there's like commands, like the roach is like commanding you to do things, like humiliate him or,
right.
or do not suffer that one to live, right? Like that kind of thing. A really neat feature. So that's kind of a cool thing. And then it's got this really, really cool, just the narrative structure, kind of going back to this idea of games that are really tightly scripted and structured, what we were calling a light railroad in our one of our earlier discussions. It takes place over the fall semester at Pemberton, and there are like predefined scenes. There's the convocation and the greeting of the new class, and then you move on to the wine and cheese social, and then there's like the Pemberton Follies, and it all leads up to the Christmas party at the end, right?
Right.
Just that whole arc I love. Like it's just kind of great and really evocative of the setting. Good stuff, but it's got some problems. This game has some problems mechanically, and they're heartbreaking problems because while the game is still fun and enjoyable, man, it would be so much better if it got cleaned up. And I think I've even heard Jason Morningstar explain that he would actually like to go back and readdress that game, because I think he's said that he's learned a lot about game design since he made the Shab-al-Hiri Roach, which was like in the early aughts, I think. Yeah, and so he'd like to go back and like redo it, like with an eye for like what he's learned, that'd be really great. And so, allow this just to be further encouragement, Jason Morningstar. So the things I don't like about it, where it kind of goes off the rails a little bit. So mechanically, it's possible to receive the roach, like to be enslaved by the roach at the very beginning. And so that's kind of weird, because it means you may have a player at the table who never got to explore their characters like non-roach.
Okay.
Like,
right.
Yeah. And I think that's part of like the charm of the game is like you see them in their like just normal petty professorness, academic setting. And then one of them like does this thing and receives the roach and becomes a crazy, megalomaniac. So I think it's kind of weird that like you can receive the roach right away. And I've had that happen in the game, and it's always weird. Like,
is it possible for a character to be roached, as it were, for the whole game?
Well, so you can ditch the roach. I'm going to get to that in a minute. I'll get to that.
Okay.
I'll get to that in a second. So it's kind of weird that you can be mechanically forced to take the roach right away. That's bizarre. The way the die conflict resolution works is you are essentially building pools of dice, to roll against, other players you're trying to like, you're trying to like humiliate or knock down, knock low, you know, like you're trying to you build your own reputation up while knocking them down. You build up these pools of dice. The main way you build up the pools of dice is you have to introduce these predefined NPCs that are in each scene. And so that incentivizes the players to do this like weird thing where you're just constantly shoving rando NPCs into your little moment, right? Like, and it's strange. Like, it doesn't come off right.
It's a weird thing to incentivize.
It's a little weird. Yeah. So it's like maybe Dan's character and my character, maybe we're having an argument by the punch bowl about like, you know, some paper that Dan just published and I think he's a hack, right? And so we're having this argument, right? You know, we're getting a little drunk or whatever. And, in an effort to like build up my dice pool, I grab Susie, the co-ed, and put her in the scene. And then Dan grabs the quarterback and puts him in the scene. And then I grab the dean of students and put him in the scene. You know, it's bizarre. It's bizarre. It still ends up being like kind of like, it's still, like I said, the game is still fun. It's just a weird it's a weird incentivization to, I don't know, to do that. It is strange.
I think it makes more sense maybe when you actually, once you have the Roach, and then like you can use them as your pawns or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you're just a professor, it's real weird.
It's definitely weird. Yeah. So here's the thing. You're building up these die pools, for an outcome that is basically arbitrary. Like you roll like just a great giant fistfuls of dice. I mean, like you might be rolling like 10 or 12 dice, right? Because you also add your own dice to it based off your academic skills and things like that. If you can work it in and your prestige and your like sort of reputation at the school and all that stuff. You build up this great big giant pool of multi-sided dice, like not just D6s, which is a 6-sided die, not just D6s, but like, D4s, D8s, D10s, all of them. But it's basically just an arbitrary result because I'm rolling a ton of dice, Dan's rolling a ton of dice, and we're just looking for the highest number. Like the highest single result.
Oh, really?
Yeah. As I recall. That's right, isn't it? Like,
I don't know.
I might be getting that wrong. But basically, most of the dice you roll don't do anything. You're just looking for like a high value, right? So it's kind of weird and arbitrary. Except, and here's another thing I don't like about it, unless you have the Roach, in which case you are really powerful because you have like really big dice. And so, if you're the Roach, you basically can't be stopped. So you've got like two different outcomes, totally arbitrary, or I'm against the Roach and I'm going to lose, right? So it's a bit weird. I'm not, it needs to be revamped. Like I think you can get to the results that he's trying to get to in some cleaner, more meaningful way. I'm not sure what it is right now off the top of my head, but there's got to be something there. And I guess the final thing that kind of bothers me about the game is, so there's a winner, right? Already that's a bit problematic, right? Story games with winners, that's weird.
Sure.
I think.
Yeah.
But to win, you have to have the most reputation points or whatever they call them, but not be enslaved to the Roach. So the winning condition incentivizes you to ditch the thing that is fun and powerful, right?
Right.
So like, the game is most fun when you have like Roach enthralled people going at it, right? Or one Roach enthralled person being totally insano, right? But if you want to quote win, you have to ditch the Roach, right? And so you have to purposely make your character like less interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's strange. And, mostly because I don't think the game needs like a winner. Like it doesn't really, like, I'm not sure.
Right.
Like, it really adds much to the process. I guess I'm sure he was just trying to like, you know, using like competition as a way of like encouraging role play or whatever, encouraging like real hard PvP role play. But I don't know. It's strange. Like, it's just kind of a weird outcome. The way I win is by being the lamest, you know,
right,
essentially, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of strange. But that's kind of all I had to say about it. In general, I love the vibe. I love the setting. Even the mechanics as weird as they are, they still lead to a pretty good place, you know. It's just not a satisfying place.
I do love that setup.
It's good.
Yeah,
it's good. It's real good. Dan, you played it, right?
Yes.
What are your, I don't think we've ever talked about your thoughts on Shab-al-Hiri, Roach.
You know, I don't remember it probably well enough to have amazingly insightful things to say, but I mean, I do remember, feeling like it was mechanically a little weird, but I mean, in general, I loved it. So,
yeah. It's real difficult to fault it because it's so good from the get-go in terms of the setup and stuff.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
It's kind of hard to find fault with it, but I would love to see Jason Morningstar, sit down and just redo it, you know, or God, we'll do it. Jason Morningstar will do it. You can put your name on it. Just we'll fix it. So yeah, Shab-al-Hiri Roach. Listeners still go buy it. It's so fun. It's great. It's still totally worth owning. All right, so Steve, that just leaves your game selection for a hoped for revision. What did you choose?
So I am hoping for a second edition of Dread. And to be clear, this is Epinaya Ravishal and I think somebody else. That version of Dread, not Dread, the game of Pandemonium or whatever it was called.
I've seen that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's confusingly
Two
Dreads.
games, one name. Weird.
So
Who would
weird.
do that?
So Dread, probably people know it as the Jenga game. Basically, the resolution mechanic is you have it's a horror game, and you have a Jenga tower in the center of the table, and your, the PCs, basically, if they're presented with a task that they, according to their character, would be able to do fairly easily, then they typically just do it. And if there's any question, if there's potential of interesting failure, they basically have to pull a block from the Jenga tower somewhere, set it back on top as if you were playing Jenga. And assuming that is completed to success, and you move on. And what I like about it is that there's the ever looming threat of tower collapse. And when the tower collapses, what that means is your character dies or is taken out of the fiction in a fictionally appropriate way. Like, it runs away and is out of the movie, as it were. That's
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, character creation, I just sort of passed over it briefly, but character creation is done through questionnaires. So the GM presents to the players questionnaires. Usually I think they have somewhere in the vicinity of 10 questions.
10 or 12, yeah.
Yeah. And the questions are a little bit open-ended. They're sort of like the things that Apocalypse World encourages you to ask about your characters, but not necessarily. It's frequently interrelated. Some of the questions will be about, which of the other characters are you in love with, or which of the other characters really pisses you off, or something like that. But some of them are secrets, and some of them are about your fears, and some, and that's pretty much character creation. You answer these questions and you put a name on it and you're done. So why I love Dread is, okay, I've played several horror games, and the only time I even remotely felt a bit of tension was when we were playing, the one with Nemocytes, please.
Oh, Society of Dreamers.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
There we go. But in my experience, there's an unmatched, very palpable tension in Dread. And I do say unmatched because I did not feel the equivalent at all in, Hell for Leather. Yeah. Even though, there certainly was tension there. There's very much a sense of, I could really screw the pooch with this, but it's not quite as heightened because if the tower collapses, bad things will happen, but it's almost certainly not going to be my death.
Your character doesn't die.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's sort of the beauty and the primary flaw with Dread, is that it takes one of the, biggest problems with like board games and card games, and, namely player elimination, and imports it to role-playing games.
Right.
So it does contribute, very much to the tension, but like, in that game we played, you were out probably halfway through, Jason.
Maybe not quite that, but it was pretty early. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I felt bad, and I had our backup character. I'm like, here you go. You're the android now.
Right. Yeah. Oh, was that me?
Yeah.
I guess it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, and then I hated that too, because I liked my character I was playing before.
Yeah.
And then I got this dumb android. And I was like, I don't want to be this android. Okay. Fine.
Yeah. It was either
But the
that or you
alternative is
sit there for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Well, for sure. No.
Yeah. But I also love the,
Can't I just be my character's brother? His like twin brother who was waiting in the corridor.
that way you could still maintain the German accent you were doing.
It was so good.
As always, of course. But the marriage of mechanics and theme is great because there's a visual representation of how screwed you guys are going to be eventually that gets worse and worse and more rickety. And please do not touch the table. And I really love that. Whenever I play, the game starts off with people around a table like normal. And then after a couple of hours, as the thing gets worse and worse,
Everyone's pushing away from it. Yeah.
Towards the end of the game we played, absolutely nobody was at the table. You just get the hell away unless you accidentally knock the tower over. And it's nice and simple. Like if I'm playing Call of Cthulhu, there's a bunch of BS crap that doesn't affect how I feel regarding the theoretically horrific things going on that distract me from it.
Right.
And so it's really simple. You pull a book, you pull a brick, you put it on top of the tower, or maybe you pull two, put them on top of the tower. And that's about it. You're not too concerned with mechanics, but it does Another flaw is it can take some time, like where nothing's really happening in the fiction as somebody pulls their
Right.
break.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's that, aspect of it.
But so issues I have with it are the aforementioned player elimination, which is probably my biggest one. And there's I wouldn't say I'm cheating by mentioning Dread because it's not really a second edition, but Abadiah Ravishal worked with Emily Care Boss to make Dread House. Are you familiar with this?
I am not.
I'm
No.
aware of the concept, basically. Dread House is aimed a little bit more at kids. It's like adult friendly, but
okay. All right. Yeah.
and so you're in a haunted house, and it comes with a map drawn by the same artist that does the maps for Jared Sorensen's Parsley games.
Okay.
And basically, it's just a haunted house thing. So what it does is, I don't know too much in specifics. I haven't read it, so this just comes from their blurb, basically. So apparently, when the tower collapses, I think you basically get to become a monster. And you sort of get to interact with the game from a different perspective. Sort of like you become the zombies or something in Zombie Cinema, something like that. Another issue I have with this is extremely high prep time.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was published in 2004. Certainly closer to the origin of story games, and it shows because it's if I wanted to start from nothing, then I'd have to prep a scenario, because the game as it stands doesn't really support too much improvising one as you go along.
Okay.
So you'd have to prep a scenario, and much more severe than that is you have to prepare character questionnaires for however many players are going to be playing in your game.
Right. Yeah.
And so that means you have to come up with 10 to 12 theoretically not completely random questions per player, in addition to doing the sort of almost clue trail of Cthulhu setting up of scenes.
Right.
So it's a little railroady.
Right.
The prep time is really high.
Yeah.
On Dread. It's real high.
And my last big issue with it is after a collapse, well, you have no tower, you have to set things back up. So there's this long pause as people gather the bricks, get the verticality aid or whatever you call it that comes with
the
Jenga.
plastic corner.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, set bricks back up, and then, you're supposed to remove, I think, 3 bricks, to make it a slightly rickety to start with. Yeah, I think you remove 3 bricks plus however many players have been eliminated.
Right.
And then it's just
Right.
not
Which
enough.
is
It's not enough. It's not enough. No way.
Because by the time people are being eliminated, that's somebody that's going to be sitting out of the game. You want the game to wrap up so they're not sitting there.
Yeah.
Maybe you can swing 30 minutes or something where they're not bored.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you got to wrap things up. So I will segue that into what I would like to see in a second edition.
Before you get going.
Yeah.
Everything you've addressed, the fixes seem easy to me. They
I'm
seem
a little worried about the player elimination one.
Yeah, I think in general, they seem like really easy fixes though, especially on the prep end of it, right? Because I think that's mostly just because it's a product of its time, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree.
Clearly, like, you could play that game in a more improvisational style, right? Like, you totally could, right? So sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to steal your thunder. I know.
Oh, no. I mean, that's stuff I'm about to mention more.
Yeah, please go for it. Yeah.
So one thing I'd like to see addressed is, things like the post-collapse lull and the post-collapse lack of tension. And like you're saying, that's an easy fix. That's okay. You don't just pull, 4 bricks after the first person gets out. You pull 15, 20 of them, whatever.
Right. But God forbid you make it collapse during that, because then we have to start over and rebuild it all again.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's
see, I'm
true.
not sure that's the right answer because, boy, it's already kind of annoying to have to rebuild the damn thing and pull 9 or whatever things out, right? So I don't know I'm not sure if that's the fix. I don't know, but keep going. Sorry.
Oh, no, actually, that's interesting. Because that would sort of be the end game trigger then, I guess. And there's just supposed to be a real quick.
No, what I'm saying is like,
afterwards?
I like what you'd suggested as a fix, which is to decrease the sort of like prolonged like period of like, of like, until the next person dies. What you're saying was like, just instead of pulling like, 3 per player, you pull like, a bunch more.
Right.
That just seems like a lot of time to spend doing that.
I mean, that's true, but
I'm not sure I don't know. I'm not sure that can't be the right answer, right? I don't know, but that's just I'm intuiting that maybe it's not. I don't know, but sorry, keep going.
I think one thing you could do when you're setting the tower back up is you'd basically do what would normally be considered cheating. So it's like, okay, we're setting the tower back up. We must prevent it from falling because that'd be really annoying. So you hold the thing or even maintain that plastic.
Leave the sleeve on
Sure.
it.
And then you just sort of pull from the sides and.
Oh, I see. So you don't actually play Jenga real fast again. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Yeah. Can I say, I always throw that plastic thing away.
That's a bad move.
I know, it is a bad move, and I do it every damn time I buy a Jenga tower. In my life, I've bought maybe half a dozen Jenga towers in my life.
Really?
I think so, yeah.
So when they fall over, you just throw them away. And
I just
this comes pre-stacked.
I just see that dumb bit of plastic, and I just toss it because and then I'm like, oh shit, that's what it. Yeah, anyway, sorry.
I actually when I ran,
I think I tried to throw yours away, didn't I?
Yes,
I did. Yeah,
you tore up the cardboard.
I did. Yeah, I was like, I don't need this. Sorry. Yeah.
So maybe that's why it took so long when we played.
When I ran Dread for the Gauntlet, I couldn't find my Jenga set, and so I went out and bought another one. So actually, maybe the solution is have 2 Jenga sets. You can just wipe the first tower off the table into a bucket and set the second one up.
A parade of Jenga table.
Save a couple minutes at least.
When the person dies, they can just start playing Jenga on the secondary tower to prep it.
Actually. Huh.
No, that is not a fix. That is not a fix.
No. I don't know. Kind of liking it. So I sort of like the variety of Jenga fixes and Dread fixes and Dread hacks that I've seen from people on the internet. And I kind of just want a Dread second edition that has, it has a base setup that hopefully addresses a number of the issues I have, but then also presents a number of alternatives.
Okay. Yeah.
What I would like to see is the Dread mechanic used to address other genres, other types of games. I heard, or actually I don't remember if this was audio or written, but I think I saw somebody talk about the fantasy game, the sort of standard D&D-esque fantasy game they read using Dread. And it resulted in fun things that, sort of sound like what Doyle was talking about with Limitations of the Flame Princess. You're in a dungeon and also it's
horror. The more horror aspect to it. Yeah.
But they were describing they've got the, big beefy fighter dude who's sort of wading into this, watery pit and then something brushes up against his leg. And they're talking about, in normal D&D game, I stab it. And Dread is like, well, fuck that. I get out. Screw this. No way. So it brings an interesting sort of, tension to.
That's kind of interesting.
I think my favorite mechanic hack for Dread was somebody talking about they ran an espionage game. And there were trust issues amongst the PCs.
Okay.
And so what they do is they play in a completely darkened room, but they have a flashlight. And so when it's your turn to pull something, you don't get to use the flashlight. You hand it to somebody you trust.
Oh, I kind of like that.
And then they shine the flashlight,
pretty
hopefully,
good. Yeah.
on the tower as you try and make a pull. But there's all sorts of interesting variations you can do on this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not aware of all that stuff because, I think at the outset, I'm just not a huge fan of Dread, but, so I've never really looked into it any deeper, but, that's pretty cool. Dan, I can see you sitting on the edge of your seat ready to tear apart Dread. Do you have anything you want to say about Dread?
Well, I think that it doesn't really need a second edition because Hell for Leather exists.
Oh, so. Sick burn. A sick Dread burn. Jeez. Wow. Okay. Thoughts? Oh, you have
those were my thoughts.
Oh, those are your thoughts.
So
okay.
why does Hell for Leather address,
Okay, so I think that, one of the things that it does well is there isn't that, the tension doesn't deflate as much because.
Yeah, that's true.
You are always in danger of knocking over the tower in Hell for Leather.
Yeah.
And even if you don't knock over the tower, you can still fuck up and you can still not succeed. Whereas in Dread, it's you succeed or you die, right? Or you don't.
Or you choose not
to do. Yeah. But in Hell for Leather, I like that, you can still miss and you can make things worse, but you don't necessarily die just because you fucked up.
That's true, but this is more my experience than the rest. I only miss or knock the tower over. Those are the two options. Right. So there's not really as much tension there until I guess I get really good at this game that, the dice bowling game.
You were bad at Jenga once too, I'm sure.
I was not. No, Jenga's way easier.
Yeah, Jenga is. Well, but I think that's the problem. And I think it's what Dan's getting at.
Yeah.
Jenga's too damn easy for about 75% of the way, right? Or
but
more.
you still can't do, you still can't not pay attention to it. You can still fuck up Jenga on the first time.
Yeah, that's
I mean, you
true.
can, but the odds that you're going to are pretty low.
Pretty slim, right? I mean,
and it leads to like the weird, well, thank God Joe's dead. Now we're all safe for an hour. So,
right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. But that's the problem with the tower, not being rickety again, as you
right. Yeah. Which I think like Hell for Leather does a good job of saying that, well, even if the tower's not necessarily rickety, you're still like more than likely going to screw things up somehow.
Well, okay. So if I'm rating, the tension in the game on a scale of 0 to 10, Hell for Leather very easily maintains a 3, but it never approaches anything that Dread gets to.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think that's definitely not true for the finale when you're basically playing it like Dread.
I didn't feel it in the finale either because, again, I say impossible. That sounds like an exaggeration. It really isn't.
It's kind of impossible. Yeah. That's true.
You need 16 properly bowled successes before the tower gets knocked over 4 times.
Sure.
And you add a die every single time you attempt.
It is incredibly hard.
I'm going to kind of pull it back to Dread a little bit here. I think the Jenga Tower, it is the classic example, we've said this before, of games whose mechanics like directly connect to the sort of like in fiction emotions or feelings, right? Dan, I don't think Dan agrees with that completely. But what I'm saying is like, I think you're right. I think it does a pretty damn good job of creating tension. I just think the tension comes a little late for me in a way. It comes a little late for me. I think the pacing of Dread in general is a little off. I
think that's fair.
The pacing is a little off. Like there's just this, it's just too slow of a build, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that makes the pacing feel a little off to some degree is, or at least why it doesn't feel like, I've only played Dread a few times, but every time I've played it, it doesn't feel like the story doesn't feel very feral because for one thing, in the beginning especially, it's not actually that hard to avoid knocking over the Jenga tower. But then also there's a lot of like lobbying going on with the GM. That's a thing that happens a lot at the table. Like, yeah. I think my guy should only be 1 pull or no pulls because I was a football player in high school and therefore I know how to run fast. Like there's a lot of that going on at the table. And to me, that I don't like it.
Was there a lot of that in our game?
I think so.
There was some. Yeah, there was some.
Okay.
Like even I think just having the discussion at all, like deflates the tension to me. Like, a little bit. It makes it more of like this. I'm just trying to like game the system a little bit, or I'm trying to I'm too worried about like, just, I don't know, like it's a little too meta and I don't like it.
Yeah.
Like a little too meta.
Like you GM setting a number by fiat, a target number, right?
Yeah.
Which I hear that some people don't like.
No, it is not like that.
It basically is. You're saying like,
don't tell me what I hate.
I don't quite agree with that, Dan, but
it's a less extreme
it's
example.
A less extreme
It's
example.
like what Cthulhu Dark does.
It's a little, well, okay.
This is my profession.
Yeah, okay. I mean, except you can't lose at Cthulhu Dark.
Right.
There's just degrees of winning.
But
right?
Isn't there also in Dread, isn't there a thing where like if you're trying to do something hard, then the GM can be like, well, maybe that's 4 pulls or something like that, right? Yeah. Which, and that's the GM deciding how hard it is.
That is like...
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. That was my point.
Well, what I'm saying is I think some of the inherent tension of the Jenga tower is deflated a little bit when you have this like table talk about like what your character should and should not be able to do and how many pulls you think this is. Like that's something, maybe it wasn't so bad in our game, but I played in games of Dread where it was like players like lobbying the GM and trying to come to some consensus with the table vis-a-vis the GM's opinion or versus the GM's opinion about how many pulls they thought it should be. And it just kind of deflates it a little bit.
Here's again why I'm lobbying for second edition. This is the sort of thing that can be addressed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, of course.
One of the fixes I liked the most, maybe the fix I liked the most, for character creation is you just completely do away with the character questionnaires. Maybe you do some, Powered by the Apocalypse style leading questions during the game.
Love that. Yeah, that'd be great.
But to start off with, you basically have 3 different sets of cards, and you're sort of generating a character by drawing cards, and it's like profession, personality, flaw. You get 3 cards, you sort of work them together, you figure out who you are. 5 minutes later, you're ready to go.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then you link characters by asking leading questions. Hey, why do you hate that guy? Hey, why do you rely on this person? Hey, what's the, what secret thing do the other people want to know? Oh, sorry. Another issue I have with this is sometimes the questionnaires can encourage table secrets, by which I mean the other players don't know.
Right.
Yes. It suggests, I think this is in the book. Maybe I'm mistaken, but it suggests that, after you fill out your questionnaires, which also, by the way, takes a while. Like
It does.
It can take like 30 minutes.
It's pretty time consuming. That's generous.
Yeah.
I've played in games, but that takes forever.
Yeah,
it
you
takes
might
a
be
long
right,
friggin' time. Yeah.
So after the players fill out the questionnaires, which is character creation, you sort of read off the answers to the questions, except for the ones you don't want to, that you think would be more secret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no one knows at the
Yeah.
table, so no one can help bring it into the fiction, except the GM, who's got like 100 questions to manage.
Right.
Right, yeah.
That leads me into another thing I'd like to see is basically at least the option to incorporate GM-less mechanics. I wasn't sure
Yeah.
a GM-less game would be very feasible, or a GM-less horror game would be very feasible before I played Society of Dreamers, but it worked perfectly in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got some game structure that you follow as a group, and you're able to incorporate, bring in horrific elements in it, especially if you know the other things about, things about the other characters that would, in vanilla Dread, be secret. You can play towards them, and you bring up, the horrific things so that you don't have to rely on the GM remembering one question on your questionnaire of 12 questions out of 6 questionnaires and just shoot me. Yeah. I think it's very ripe, especially since it's been 11 years, I'm not mistaken, for a second edition. I think there's a lot of potential in the mechanic.
I agree. Yeah.
And I think things could be fixed pretty easily.
It could use 10 years of mechanical development.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, behind it. And I think that's what we're saying about, more particularly about Shab-al-Hiri Roach as well. Danger Mountain. I think that just needs like
That needs to be made into an actual game.
A solid first edition, right? Yeah. Because Danger Mountain's pretty close, right? It's pretty close to being pretty, like, perfect, right? Not perfect, but, great. Cool. Do you guys want to say anything else about our, I do. Before I throw it to you guys, let me say what I want to say. Just to put a little coda on this whole conversation. I think it's worth pointing out, these are games that, like, I have always had fun with Dread, right? Despite the fact that, like, I can pick out a bunch of issues I have with it. I've always had fun with it. Shab-al-Hiri Roach I just love, and I've never played Danger Mountain, but I love it conceptually. It seems like a cool idea. And so, I think it's worth pointing out that, like, this criticism, and I think this is true of the whole show, like our entire podcast, like a lot of our criticism, it comes from a place of love, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really worth pointing out here, because I don't want anybody to listen to any of our episodes and be like, boy, these guys are dicks when it comes to mechanics. Like, they're so picky. They're
I think I've done nothing but complain about whenever Dungeon World comes up on the podcast.
I know, yeah.
But it occurred to me that I admire its mechanics so much.
Yeah,
even if the fantasy type
is
isn't my thing.
Not your jam. Yeah. I mean, all of our criticism, it comes from a place of love, right? Particularly this episode. Like, these are games that we, expressly like, but would like to see a different thing.
Right.
So it's all in the betterment of the hobby, because we're so passionate about it. But I don't have anything else to say. What about you guys?
I'm good.
All right, cool. That was our podcast. If you'd like to talk to us, or disagree with us, you should go to Google Plus and join our community. If you go to the community section and search for the Gauntlet, we will be there. If you would like to write us an email, it is gauntletpodcast@gmail.com. And those are the only places to reach us, right?
I wasn't even paying attention. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
There's a website. Don't go there.
Don't go there. And I think that's all we've got. So, thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Brett Gillen, why do you hate money?